A very good afternoon to you. Islamic State bride Shamima Begum has told Sky News she's sorry for the pain she caused her parents when she joined IS, but she doesn't regret travelling to Syria. While speaking to us from the refugee camp in northern Syria, where this morning she gave birth to a baby boy, she said a lot of people should have sympathy for her as she detailed her wish to return to the UK. Well, the 19-year-old was talking to our correspondent John Sparks. He began by asking her to describe what she's been through.
You have obviously been through a lot over the last few years. Could you describe for us what it has been like to live with and under Islamic State?
At first it was nice. It was like how they, showed it in the videos. Like, you come, you make a family together, but then afterwards things got harder. When we lost Raqqa, and we had to keep moving and moving and moving. And the situation got difficult. Yeah.
Was there a point where you started to have second thoughts about your life in Islamic State, under Islamic State?
Just only at the end, like after my son died, I realised I had to get out for the sake of my children, the sake of my daughter and my baby. So, yeah.
It was only at the end. It was only at the end. Okay. But you didn't have any regrets up until that point. What was it about Islamic State that attracted you? What did you like about it?
The way they showed how you can go, they'll take care of you, you can have your own family there, you can do anything. You're living under Islamic law.
Did you know what Islamic State were doing when you left for Syria? Because they had beheaded people, there were executions.
Yeah, I knew about those things, and I was okay with it at first because, I started becoming religious just before I left. And, from what I heard, that Islamically that is all allowed, so I was okay with it.
You didn't question that?
No.
Do you think you've made a mistake when you look back at what you've been through over the last 4 years?
A mistake in going back to going to Dola?
Yes, a mistake in coming here, living under Islamic State.
In a way, yes, but I don't regret it because it's changed me as a person. It's made me stronger, tougher.
There's a struggle going on in the UK now at home about whether you should be allowed to come home or not. You know that, do you? Okay. What are your feelings about that?
I think a lot of people should have sympathy towards me for everything I've been through. When I didn't know what I was getting into when I left, and I just was hoping that maybe for the sake of me and my child, they let me come back.
Okay.
Because I can't live in this camp forever. It's not really possible.
Well, I'm joined now by the lawyer for Shamima Begum's family, Mohammed Akunji. Thanks very much for coming into the studio for us this afternoon. First of all, can I talk about the birth of this little baby? I presume you've been in touch with the family today about it. What's been their reaction? How did they hear about it? And have they been able to have any contact with Shamima since the birth?
Yeah, well, they haven't had contact with Shamima, and, Shamima's just given birth today. She had given birth to 2 other children. One was 1.5 years old in November when that child died from malnutrition, and the other was 9 months in January when that child died. So we have a 19-year-old who's just given birth with 2 children who've recently died, and the family's reaction is quite shocked that, given that their sister is in the situation that she's in, the first thing they see is a journalist pointing a large microphone at their sister who's just given birth, clutching her sides, no doubt out of pain, and were shocked about the ethics around that. Really.
Oh, really? That's interesting. So they didn't see it as an opportunity to hear from their daughter, because our journalist, John Sparks, did say, have you got a message for the family? And our understanding was that she hasn't had any contact with them, so it might have been a good opportunity for them to sort of get a sense of how she's doing.
I've been on their behalf trying to contact the camp. It seems every journalist and his accoutrement has access to Shamima in her pain, apart from the family and from us. So we want to ask some questions around, well, how is it that access is being exclusively given to journalists at the exclusion of family and lawyers on her behalf?
OK, and so the family do want to make contact with her, to be clear. And what would their message be to her? Do they want her to come home?
Well, of course, they want her to come home, they want their grandchild to come home, and they also don't want advantage taken in breach of Ofcom rules, sections 7 and 8 maybe, around the ethics of getting and garnering news reporting from somebody in those circumstances when they haven't even had access to help.
OK, but what about the ethics of somebody going to join a terrorist group overseas, supporting terrorist activities through marrying a jihadi fighter? And we've heard from her herself that she has no regrets about what she's done, and that people should feel sympathy for her.
Well, in terms of a 15-year-old being groomed and taken over to ISIS-controlled territory, we need to ask questions. A, how did that happen? And where does the blame lie with that? And those questions were hashed out back in 2015, where we found serious failings in safeguarding with the school, failing to inform the parents about what was going on in that school, with the police, who failed to apply protocols, and with the local authority. So those are the pointed questions this family have had to deal with for the last 4 years.
OK, and what about the fact that she's now 19 years old, and we're not talking about a child anymore, we're talking about somebody who's able to say what is right or wrong?
With respect, we are talking about a child, we're talking about a one-day-old baby as well. So that's our primary concern. The secondary concern is then Shamima coming home. So our primary concern as of today is bringing a one-day-old baby home.
And what would you like the UK government to be doing in this situation?
Well, we'd be grateful if they could assist with emergency travel documents so that the family have a chance to bring them back to an embassy, get some proper medical care around her, and more importantly, the baby, and take it from there. And no one is saying that if she's committed any offences that she shouldn't face justice, but the justice she should be facing is British justice, not mob rule.
Oh, absolutely. And British justice would say that if you've joined a terrorist organisation, that is a crime.
In the circumstances, yeah, absolutely. The question is a 15-year-old who's been groomed and taken over there, is that a crime? Or, like Bernard Hogenhow said at the time, that they'd be treated as victims because of their age and what had happened. OK,
so as far as I'm aware, the options that stand are that she could be given a temporary exclusion order, which would mean that she wouldn't be able to come home for a number of years. She could be stripped of her citizenship, which I think there's obviously some discussion about whether or not that is right to render someone stateless or even possible. Or the third would be that she could come home, be questioned and potentially detained. What would become of the baby in those circumstances? Would the family wish to raise that baby themselves?
Well, those are not the only options. There's also TPIM orders that the Home Office have as well. So those are temporary exclusion orders as well. What would happen to the baby?
Yeah, so are the family willing to raise the baby?
Well, yeah, they'd have to be assessed in terms of their suitability for looking after the child. If they pass that, then they could potentially bring up the child. If they don't, then that would be something where the local authority would step in.
Do you think that they would pass those tests, given that they raised a child that then went and was radicalised already?
Well, then that would mean the school and the police wouldn't pass those tests either, and nor would the local authority.
Do you believe that she's dangerous, given that the head of the MI6 said that she could well have picked up skills while she's been in Syria, could well have connections? Indeed, she's said she would like to be back in contact with her Dutch jihadi husband.
So this is where the rule of law comes in, is this is all speculation. She may well have picked up skills. These things need to be assessed, and the security services are best at doing that, and the head of MI6 has been quite clear that she has the right to come back home. So what we're talking about is a 19-year-old girl who has given birth to 3 children now, 2 of which have died. Her skill set appears to be a housewife in difficult circumstances, on the face of it, and any other skills need to be evidenced and dealt with at that stage under rule of law.
And just to be clear, what were the family's reactions to some of the things that she'd said today? For example, that she was OK with beheadings?
Well, I mean, it's obviously shocking. The family were the first people all those years ago, 4 years ago, to try and bring her back and get her away from that sort of a narrative. They did everything they could at the time. They appealed for her to return. They went out to Turkey to try and bring her back. Obviously, the family want nothing to do with that sort of a narrative. but they also want the child back, or their grandchild back, so that they can save that child from any sort of indoctrination in that way.
Okay, Mohammed Akunji, thanks very much indeed for your time.
Pleasure.
Thank you.